Welcome to Movie Postmortem, where we dissect films of all kinds, whether they're good, bad, or those guilty pleasures we just can't quit. I'm Reggie Hill, and I'm joined by my nephew Isaiah Brown. Together, we're here to examine what worked, what didn't, and why we keep coming back for more. So grab your popcorn because no movie is safe from the scalpel on Movie Postmortem. Thanks for joining us today. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about The People Under the Stairs, a 1991 horror comedy, I guess is best to call it, that was written and directed by Wes Craven. And I'm very excited because The People Under the Stairs, this is the first of our listener requested films. Someone actually recommended this to me. They thought it would be fun to hear us kind of talk about this on the podcast. So thank you for the recommendation. And so I'll give a kind of brief summary of the film. The People Under the Stairs is the story of a young boy whose name is Dexter, but his nickname is Fool, who is, from the inner city, and it takes place on the his 13th birthday. And what happens is that he is from a family that's very poor. His mother is, sick and dying of cancer. They're about to be evicted from their home. And so he decides to rob his landlord with the assistance of his sister's boyfriend and another guy. Their plan is that they believe that their landlord has a bunch of very valuable gold coins that they can take, and then they can use the proceeds from the sale of those coins to solve all their problems. This robbery does not go as planned, and when they get inside, they really find out that there are some truly horrific things happening in this house, and then they learn about the people under the stairs.
That's it. That's an accurate summary, if I'd say so for myself. But my immediate impression was just like, okay, so this is kind of like a whole like black empower, like black people in the ghetto, like black people being extorted kind of thing, right? So after the first 15 minutes, it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, this film crosses into so many different genres, and it's made in 1991. A lot of the commentary that's there about capitalism, gentrification of neighborhoods, wealth hoarding, that's still sadly very spot on now. I was impressed that this was something that Wes Craven wrote and directed, and I don't think I should tell anybody who listens to a podcast what Wes Craven is kind of best known for, including Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, and several other properties. So I was kind of like hats off to him for setting up a film that dealt with that as kind of the major, actual, plot of the film.
Yeah, it's the overarching plot of the film. Just once we actually get into the movie, you forget about that entirely.
Yeah, and that's where I would say, first off, I'll give my solid, kind of my review of the film. I best describe this film as bizarrely entertaining. I was never once bored with this film. I don't know what single genre you could put it in. This was a very entertaining film. And the person who recommended this film to me, they said that they watch it a lot, and I understand why, they watch it a lot. It
I
has
feel like you could watch this multiple times and know something different each time.
Yeah, it's got so many elements. It has great one-liners. But the thing that's kind of weird to me, I'm like, who is it actually aimed at? In some ways, it's like an adult film and a kid film mixed together. Parts of it remind me almost of like Home Alone, then other parts are unbelievably adult and graphic and gory. And so this is
It's
a
so
R-rated
weird.
film. It's clearly an R-rated film, almost aimed at kids. It's very bizarre. But again, I was entertained by this film the entire time. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5 stars.
It's so weird because it's like in 1 minute it's Home Alone, but then the next minute it's just the Society.
Yes.
You ever seen that before?
Yeah, it bounces like in the same scene, even what type of tone it's going for. And most of the time, when it stays in one tone, it's good. It just shifts back and forth. And we'll get into this as we get to our nitty gritty, the way we
Yeah.
do. At the end, I think it kind of takes a direction and a tone that really does a disservice to the material that it set up. But it's a very interesting film.
Yeah, and so I'm still trying to wrap my head around what I just watched. I literally just got done watching it like 3 minutes ago. I I wish I woke up earlier in order to watch this because I kind of woke up a little bit later than I wanted to. Because if I had more time, I would have rewound this movie so many times just to make sure I was watching, like, make sure I was actually watching what was actually on screen. And so this is probably going to be the first movie that breaks my rating system. I'm going to give this a 2 out of 10 stars.
And so let's kind of dive into our causes of celebration and our, causes of death. For me, the first cause of celebration that I alluded to earlier is the fact that it actually deals with a very serious genre. It deals with themes that are ahead of its time in many ways, or maybe just back then in the 90s, I wasn't aware of how, important these themes were. But the whole idea of gentrification, the fact that these people in this inner city neighborhood were being taken advantage of by, the rich people who were buying up all the property and kicking them out. I felt like I really liked that. It was kind of refreshing because of the fact that it deals with characters who are kind of unlikable in some ways. I think that it's kind of refreshing. So you have Fool, who's played by an actor, Brandon Adams, and he is joined in his journey to break into this house primarily by Ving Rhames, who plays a character called Leroy. Ving Rhames is great in his role as really this abusive kind of bully type of guy who doesn't like Fool. Fool is his girlfriend's younger
Yeah,
brother.
he's an asset pretty much.
Yeah. And so he's basically bullying Fool to help them break into this house. They need Fool to case the joint essentially so they can figure out what the security system is like. And they don't let Fool kind of leave early on in the adventure when things start to turn bad. And spoilers, again, you should have already watched the film. It's on Tubi. Ving Rhames' character Leroy is killed pretty early in the film, which then leaves Fool to kind of suffer everything that happens on his own. But like throughout this whole story, you're like, well, Fool is kind of not a great kid. He did go along with breaking into a house. Leroy was a terrible person, abusive towards his girlfriend, towards Fool, and you get the idea that nobody in this story is really kind of a good character. But I really actually like
I,
stories like that.
I was going to say, is that really a cause of death? Is not cause of death, but is that really a cause of celebration? Is that more just like an observation?
To me, it's a call to celebration. I think too many films go out of their way to make their protagonist perfect or likable. I was like, no, like, it's kind of you don't have to like a protagonist. And I felt in this way you were seeing kind of bad people of different scales put against each other.
The antagonists of this movie are so unlikable that makes the main character likable by comparison.
Yes, and I think that's the main premise of the story. This film came out in 1991. If you're a horror fan, there have been lots of movies that have kind of done this premise since then. The idea that, okay, we're going to rob this house, it's an easy target. Oh, wait, there's something absolutely crazy going on. These people are horrible. That's
Yeah,
been done a lot,
yeah,
since then.
it's like don't breathe almost.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's the first thing that reminds me of.
Yeah, and so lots of films have done that. There was a film that came out a few years ago called Villains that was pretty similar in that regard, that the people in the home are really bizarre. And so let's talk a little bit about the people in the home.
Yeah,
This,
that's actually my next cause of celebration. The two actors that played whoever those were, they did a great job of acting like absolute lunatics.
yes. And so what we are kind of introduced to in the story is what we believe is a husband and wife. They never actually give their names. They just call each other mommy and daddy. Mom is played by Wendy Robbie, and the dad is played by Everett McGill. And I'm not familiar with Everett's work. I know Wendy Robbie, she played several characters for David Lynch in different properties, including Twin Peaks. And one of the behind the scenes quotes that I really love, and it tells you a lot about this movie, she said that the most fun she ever had on a movie set was the people under the stairs. She just gets to go off the rails in a mommy dearest s performance where she's a just over the top crazy woman who is abusive and has this desire to kill everything she encounters. They really do a great job acting these roles.
Yeah, absolutely. Just there were several moments, even, and I'm by myself in my apartment right now. But there were several moments where I was watching this, where I just let out an audible, just like, "What in the?" And it was mostly at their scenes.
Yes, they're the main antagonists in the film, even more so than the people under the stairs. I think that's the biggest surprise to me is that the people under the stairs, and we'll get into what they are a little bit later, they're not actually the biggest threat in this film by far.
It's funny for a movie titled "The People Under the Stairs." They only have a good 15% to do with the story. Pretty much.
Yeah, it's actually kind of shocking that the social commentary in many ways really suggests that the couple that own the home are far worse than even the people under the stairs, which are essentially, I would say, not necessarily mutants, but you get the idea that the people under the stairs are these individuals who the couple has come across in different means that they have abused. They've cut their tongues out. They've kind of starved them. I wouldn't say that they're actually mutants, but you get the idea that they might have done lobotomies to them or all kinds of other things. So there's kind of like cannibalistic people living in their
Yeah.
basement, like locked behind a gate.
Full on eating the ribs of this one dude in the basement. Just like, wow.
Yeah, and that's what the people under the stairs are, but we see them occasionally. But the bigger threat the entire time is mommy and daddy and their dog Prince, who is really the main antagonist for Fool for a good portion of the film as he's trying to run around this house and avoid being captured. He has to deal with this Rottweiler who was just bent on killing him.
We kind of get the hints during the beginning of the movie that mommy and daddy really aren't all the way there. Once Fool is actually trapped in the house and they come back, they're like, okay, someone broke into our home. Let's dog go get them. Then that happens. Then all of a sudden it just dips like all of a sudden they dip like a good 300%. It just gets even weirder.
Yeah, and I knew when you texted me, like, what kind of film is this? Exactly what moment of the film you're on. So once Fool is trapped in the house, the dog is chasing him, and then Daddy emerges from a room wielding a shotgun, wearing a black leather bondage suit. It's one of the most shocking, bizarre moments I've seen in any film because it comes out of nowhere.
That's the exact moment I text you. Because okay, here's my initial assessment of this movie. This is the most bizarre, grounded movie I've ever seen in my life.
Because Daddy just comes out just firing his shotgun into the walls. He's trying to hit Fool even though he doesn't know where he is. It's just unhinged behavior
and
out of
he's
nowhere.
and he's hooping and hollering like the Sand People from Star Wars.
Yes. And it just all of a sudden, the film goes from a really bizarre film to a film that's even somehow more bizarre than you could have ever imagined in just that moment. And it doesn't really ever let up from there. And again, this really works because of the actors and their performances. Everett McGill as Daddy, he just is totally into this character, the madness this guy has. You get the idea that he's almost a giant juvenile, that he's not really, like you said, he's not there mentally, and he's violent and scary and dangerous, but also kind of completely childlike in many ways.
While I kept watching, I was just like thinking, man, that poor girl. It's like there's like little hints of that he might be doing some things which we will not talk about.
Yes. And so we should introduce Alice. And so the only other person in the home that we know of early in the film is a young kind of teenage girl named Alice. She is essentially terrified of mommy and daddy. Even simple tasks like giving them back the plate that she ate with, you can tell that she's just terrified of saying something wrong or doing something wrong or breaking their rules. They want her to not talk. And you clearly see at one point daddy about to abuse her in the best case scenario, only physically. And so you really feel sorry for this girl who is seemingly trapped in this house upstairs with mommy and daddy.
I think she's like the only like actual like likable character in this movie, honestly.
Yeah, she's the
Where
only true
she's
innocent person
because
in
really
this.
because she's just the victim in all this, pretty much.
Yes, and I think that plays a role much later in the story. But before we get there, I would say that is kind of my biggest cause of celebration of the film. It's just bizarre. It just has bizarre characters. It takes these bizarre turns, and so that's why I really consider it a cause of celebration. And so my next cause of celebration for the film is that it's just really funny. I actually laughed several times in the film. It's filled with really funny one-liners and moments that really you don't see in a lot of horror films. So that's why I describe this as kind of like a horror comedy. There are times when it gets too childish and too kind of cartoonish, but just a lot of the early lines of the dialogue, it's just actually really funny. And I actually appreciated that a lot.
That's fair. If I wasn't just so bewildered the entire time I was watching the movie, there were moments I could have left, but I was just so shocked at what I was watching. I just didn't have it in me.
Yeah. And I think
There is the moment where I could have laughed if I wasn't so like, what on earth is this? It's the scene where Daddy he rolls around. He's like, I got him, I got him, I got him, I got him, I got him.
yeah,
And I
he
was
started
just
doing a dance.
and I was just like I could have laughed, but I was just so bewildered.
Yeah, and I like a lot of the dialogue in the beginning between Leroy and Fool because Leroy is very abusive, bullying, but he's funny. Ving Rhames does a great job with the character. A lot of the things he says would go above the rating that we want for this podcast, so I can't repeat them. But he's just really funny in terms of the things that he says and how he kind of goads Fool along the whole time. One of the things I like that we could repeat on the podcast when they first break into the house they hear these weird sounds and they don't actually understand what's going on. And he kind of chalks it up to something normal. He just says, "Oh, it's nice to see that rich folks got rats too." I think in terms of why we like comedy in horror is because it does a good job of breaking up the tension. Like you said, this could be a very tense, in some cases, very gross, gory film. And sometimes having that tension relief from some comedy is actually well appreciated. So I actually like that this was an actual comedy. You can tell they put effort into it. The one-liners, the comedic moments that really showed, and I appreciated it.
Let's just take a quick pause to pay some bills real quick, pay the rent, file your taxes. It's tax day today while we're recording this, and we'll come back with our causes of death.
Looking for a new place to live? Need affordable housing with character, charm, and reinforced basement locks? Then call Mommy and Daddy's Property Management Services, where we believe in traditional family values and strict tenant control. We offer windows that don't open, doors that only lock from the outside, and floor plans that include miles of secret tunnels for when you have to disappear some of your problems or maybe some of your tenants. Worried about security? Don't be. We keep the property safe using our in house security system. It includes a leather clad man with a shotgun who's not afraid to use it, booby traps, and an aggressively trained attack dog that knows what fear smells like. And remember, we don't ever do background checks, and we prefer if you don't do one on us either. Mommy and Daddy's Property Management, where the rent is high and the tenants are somewhere down below. Okay, we're back. So let's talk about the causes of death for this film. So I'll let you go ahead and start.
Yes, thank you. And here's my biggest causes of death for this movie. I feel like this movie had a big identity crisis where it didn't really know what it wanted to be overall. And that was fine for the most part, but when it comes to a movie like this, I think a very clear like style of the movie would have been more appreciated.
Yes, I agree. As we said earlier, this bounces between hard, gory, violent, R-rated film and almost Bugs Bunny level cartoon in many points. It's not clear exactly what tone they wanted, and the shift sometimes kind of undermines the seriousness or even the horror, scary aspect that they're going for.
Yeah, it's funny because when I looked at this movie while I was watching it on the IMDb page, it says satire is one of the tags under it. And I'm just like, well, Scream was also a satire, and it wasn't like this. So
Yeah, and this is where you can kind of see Wes Craven playing around with horror and comedy. He didn't get the balance perfectly right here. I think he did a much better job later with Scream and some of the later, Friday the 13th. Not he didn't do all the other ones. What was it? The New Nightmare. I think you
yeah,
see him
New
playing
Nightmare.
more with parody, with satire, even in the context of horror. Here, I think the balance is off. That's why in some cases you see grotesque things, people being butchered, cut up, shot, and you also see very cartoonish like things. At one point where Leroy and Fool are getting attacked by Prince, the Rottweiler, Leroy is getting like mauled by Prince, and so Fool
Oh,
smartly
I almost forgot about that. Yeah.
decides he's like, Leroy, give me your hand, because they've tried to exit the property through the front door And this place is like a fortress. Once they get inside, they can't get out. The front door is electrified. They remember that. So Fool was like, okay, let's link arms. Fool grabs the doorknob. So the electricity goes through Fool, through Leroy, into the dog. And they all just gotta go like a cartoon. And they like all fall down. It's like
Yeah,
that kind of film.
yeah, jerking like full on. What's his name in Home Alone?
Yes,
that's
yes.
that's what it was
Many,
like.
many scenes will remind you of Home Alone. That's intentional. I think sometimes it's too much. Many scenes towards the end, including several scenes where they're in the chimneys and they're sliding down, dropping bricks like to hit the daddy in the face. It's like a burglar in Home Alone. It's very child kind of centered or oriented in a way that's kind of bizarre because the film is very serious at this point. Many people have died, and then all of a sudden it becomes Kevin McAllister like trying to fight his way out.
And again, I said this earlier, but I genuinely feel this. So we're like, this movie did have like the undertones of like, oh, black issues, but then you completely forget about that like 15 minutes in, once we're in the house. And then we only remember that's what it was about during like the middle and like the end of the story.
Yes, it kind of loses that thread part of the way through, and then it tries to pick it up in a way that's way too big towards the end.
And I'm just
Where,
like, it's way too late for this. We just saw what was going on in this house. I'm more interested in this than whatever the heck was going on in the ghetto.
yeah, that's where their stakes that are raised way too high actually undermine the more simple community empowerment or black empowerment message that they're going for at the very end of the film. Even the level of destruction and action that takes place at the very end of the film is too much. And maybe we could just dive into that kind of here. At the end of the film, Fool has gone back to the house to free Alice. Even though he got out, he wants to actually keep his promise to go back to free her. He helps the people under the stairs escape. People under the stairs, they kill mommy. Fool is like having a standoff with daddy. The whole house is wired to blow up for who knows what reason. And that's literally what Fool does. He makes the entire house explode. At this point, all the community has gathered outside because they're finally, through a very lazy writing, going to take a stand against these greedy landlords. The entire house explodes so that cash and gold coins can shoot up through the chimney, raining down wealth on the, inner city community. I get the point, but it's so poorly done that I can only
Dude,
laugh about the absurdity of it.
brother, why was their house rigged to blow up?
Or more importantly, how would Fool survive an explosion like that that killed Daddy, destroyed the house in its entirety, enough to blow cash and gold coins out to rain on the citizens of the inner city? It makes no sense. It's too cartoonish.
I am more confused on why was the house rigged to blow up? That just what? And also, why was their house just Fort Knox? What was that?
Yeah, that's the thing that the level of security that existed in the house was something that was dictated by the plot of the story. You get the idea. Unfortunately, this is kind of the bad writing. They pry their way into the house, Leroy and Fool do, through the only door that you could actually break into. Everything else is kind of locked shut. There's an intricate system with like shutters and intercom communication in the house where you get the idea mommy and daddy have locked the place down so the people under the stairs can't escape. So it's impossible for Leroy and then later Fool to try to get out. They can't even just go out the window and drop down to the ground. It's somehow always whatever they're trying to do. There's been a trap, of some kind set up so that they can't do that. That's when the writing gets kind of weak because otherwise you'd be like, okay, it couldn't be that impossible to get out of the house, but somehow it is.
Now it's like I'm still not entirely sure how that other guy even died in there. Like they said he like he died from fear or whatnot, but like what?
Yes, so they send another guy into the house to try to get more information. They have another guy named Spencer who is helping them with this break-in robbery. He goes in disguised as a, gas meter reader. The couple let him in and they never see him again. So they kind of feel, hey, this guy's double crosses. Maybe he's stealing the coins for himself. They see the couple leave. They break into the house. Then Fool later stumbles upon this guy, his name is Spencer, on his body and realizes that he's been scared to death, which Fool has a great line. You think he was white before? You should see his face now. But we never actually see how he died, what actually happened to him, or anything. So that's one of the kind of loose threads that the film has. But yeah, like you said, that tonal shift happens multiple times in the film where it kind of bounces between serious and then comedy. We were scared when we first saw Daddy. He's literally running around shooting guns. You get the idea that he wants to kill people. Then when he's facing Fool, Fool just literally like, oh, I'm gonna punch you in the crotch, and he's like, oh, oof, drops to his knees like he's in Home Alone 3 or something, and he kind of runs after Fool, but Fool like slightly dodges to the left, so he goes charging into the wall. It's like
Yeah, he
this is
goes from
really
like a,
silly.
and then it shifts to just another one of the burglars from Home Alone.
Yes, and so that's where I felt the tonal shift really did a disservice to the film because I like when they were scary. I like that they were bizarrely unpredictable. So then to make them just Home Alone burglars who really, they're not going to hurt that kid. Even when they catch him, I was like, well, this just doesn't fit the tone that they had established already. They catch Fool, kind of maybe halfway into the film. And despite the fact that you've seen them kill multiple people, they just don't really ever kind of treat him harshly. It's like, oh, well, we'll throw you in the basement and let the people under the stairs deal with you now. And it just didn't track for mommy and daddy. It just didn't track
Yeah.
for their characters. They would have let him live.
You cannot convince me that during the time for when Fool is going around his house and when they come back, he has enough time to put on that full on bondage suit and grab that shotgun. You cannot convince me he had enough time to do that.
Here's another example that I think perfectly points out what kind of film this is. In the end, when Fool has decided to come back to the house after he's escaped to save Alice, he breaks in. He hears mommy and daddy going upstairs. They're walking upstairs. He grabs like a poker from the fireplace. He's gonna, attack them with it, maybe bash them over the head with it. As he's walking up the stairs, you hear the conversation between mommy and daddy. You hear them like talking about they're gonna catch him, and daddy starts saying his prayers. And then when Fool walks into the room, you see, oh, it's just a tape recorder. And I'm like, this makes no sense. This is cartoon logic. When did they record this? Sit it on the bed so that it ends perfectly as he walks in the room. I'm like, this is literally cartoon logic at this point.
Honestly, this is a conversation that they would have recently. So when do they have the time to record this, set this up as a trap? And what is this movie?
And then when they emerge to try to attack Fool, somehow they're not prepared to capture this kid.
And again, this is a 13-year-old kid.
So that's the kind of film that this is. I I love how bizarrely entertaining it is, but that's a problem where all of a sudden it turns into Home Alone, especially the third act. The third act when Fool comes back, it's Home Alone and Looney Tunes. That's a Bugs Bunny joke or a Bugs Bunny skit right there. So that's what it turns into.
And again, this is the same movie where we just saw Daddy hacking up this dude, serving his remains to the people in the people under the stairs, and taking bites off his ribs and whatnot. And also, mommy forcing Alice to clean up the blood and then throwing her into a scalding hot bath to clean herself. This is the same movie. And then it just turns into Bugs Bunny.
Yes. It's like you have Jason, then he turns into Yosemite Sam all of a sudden. It walks that line very closely to being spoof or parody. It doesn't get there. I think to me it's clearly different, but it gets pretty close. At one point, also when they were trying to run away from the dog in the tunnels inside the walls of the house, they trick the dog into going down this long slide, and the dog is howling like he's Scooby Doo, like sliding down this long rail, and he comes like out like spinning in the kitchen. I half imagine the dog to be like rut row before he goes falling. Sometimes it really walks that line really
Honestly,
closely.
that could have been a classic like a Marmaduke moment right
Yeah.
there.
And so that's a very fair kind of cause of death for the film.
Yeah, the
It
tone shift.
The
Yeah.
tone shift just happens in a way that's unfortunate towards the end, especially.
Here's the next cause of death for me. Pretty much the paper thin and unnecessary characters in this movie.
Yeah, that's the thing I was actually surprised by. You're introduced to a few characters in the beginning of the film. You have Fool and his mother, and I believe his mother never actually gets out of bed the entire time. She's just
Nope.
sick mother in bed the entire film. his sister, who the film opens with her doing his, tarot card reading, it's not clear exactly what type of character she is. You hear Leroy saying that she's been turning tricks and all kinds of stuff. She's not involved in the story in any meaningful way. Fool's grandfather shows up later in the film just to
He's
kind of
just there.
to
I'm
be
just like,
re
wait, he had a grandpa? Where?
yeah.
When?
He does some exposition dumping to kind of raise the stakes even more because it's from his grandfather that we learn that mommy and daddy are actually brother and sister. And he delivers kind of a mini, exposition dump about how the greed and the money that this family had hoarded for generations is the reason that they've kind of gone so crazy. And then you never hear from him, you kind of again.
Honestly, yeah. Grandpa in this movie is the crazy Ralph,
Yeah.
pretty much. He serves the exact same role. We're just like, as the harbinger of doom. We're just like, give us a quick little background for the movie. And again, for what this movie was, you could have cut them out completely and it just been Fool and his mother in bed. This all started because Fool wanted to break into this house to support his family, the family that we know pretty much nothing about.
Yeah. That's very true. It's kind of in that ways, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory on steroids.
Honestly, it is really.
I would not be shocked if that's one of the inspirations. The one thing I do know about in terms of inspiration, Wes Craven said he was inspired to write the film after reading a real life news story about burglars who broke into a house. And when the authorities arrived, the burglars disappeared. But what they discovered was that there were locked doors in the house and noises coming from behind them. And there were children who had been locked up inside and they were never allowed to go out. That's what his inspiration was for the story. Maybe this is a good time to take a quick break and we'll come back with our script stitch ups. Every year, dozens, maybe hundreds of people fall between the cracks of society and they end up under the stairs, forgotten, malnourished. At the People Preservation Foundation, we believe everyone deserves a second chance, even if they spent the last 15 years crawling through a duct system. With your help, we provide reintegration programs that teach basic skills like being exposed to sunlight again, eating food that isn't raw, and not screaming when a man comes downstairs waving a shotgun. For just $30 a month, you can sponsor one former stair dweller, the People Preservation Foundation, because no one deserves to live beneath the stairs forever. And so we're back. So, as we discuss the end of the film, I think this is a good place to pivot towards our script stitch ups. As we were discussing the end of the film where the community is kind of rallied outside the house, we mentioned that Fool is still actively fighting for his life inside. And this is where I would have loved to see something more active from the crowd outside. Why weren't they breaking into the house to free Fool? Why don't we see them pulling out the members of this family who have been oppressing them and abusing them for so long?
Yeah, exactly. Once the people under the stairs, they're out. They just leave. The people don't react to them at all. They're picking up money. They just slip by. And I'm just like, okay, do we see what happens to the people under the stairs? Nope. Roll credits.
Yeah, so for a kind of empowerment moment, you don't see the people actually empowering or even taking revenge themselves at all. And so I felt that was where I would have changed the story to have the people outside actually do something. You see that the people under the stairs kill mommy, daddy is killed in a giant explosion that blows up the whole house. I would have rather you seen the community deal with both of them,
Yeah.
in this story.
And for a quote unquote black empowerment movie, it really doesn't put us in a good light, does it? So where we can only get by out of the ghetto if we leech off of some other rich beehole's downfall. That's not good.
Yeah, I would say that that's a bit questionable. I have seen several films like that. There's a film called Trespass that came out in the 90s. It's very similar, not similar in terms of horror, but the same kind of plot. Like, oh, two groups of people all kind of like fighting over somebody else's money. And that's the kind of film that I think this is in a way where I get what they're saying. I don't believe you have to paint everything in a good, perfect light. But like you said, for a black empowerment clear angle of the film, it is kind of like, okay, there are no redeeming black characters in the film.
And like I think they tried to reel it in with Fool going back in to save the girl, but just like but then the rest of the movie still happens. So where like these black people show up, do nothing, and take their money from these dead people.
They're like having a celebration, like on the Forest Moon of Endor after the Death Star 2 exploded.
Yeah, and I guess we're not bad people because his sister had that quick speech to those to mommy before everything blew up, I guess. But still, like, and I know for a fact that money is stolen, of course it is, or whatnot. But like, it still looks bad.
My other big script stitch up for a film called The People Under the Stairs. The
Oh yeah, I
people
was going
under
to
the
get to that.
stairs, yeah, they don't
They,
really do anything.
they are in terms of importance in this movie, they are 5%.
And I get the idea that they were going for. The people under the stairs are victims, along with Alice, of this horrible couple. But I feel that you have to at least show them being threatening or scary. We don't really see that most of the time, even though supposedly Spencer, the fake gas meter reader who went in, died of fright when seeing them and they ate his hand or something. They're never really depicted as being scary. I felt like that was a mistake in the film to really have them be so off screen most of the time that it kind of makes you not care about them. They don't really even seem to be important at the end of the story. They just get freed and you see them wandering into society. And I was like, okay, good luck with everything from, this point forward. So actually make the people under the stairs a lot more threatening, a lot more essential to the story itself.
Yeah, this movie, I feel like they called it the people under the stairs just so people wouldn't be caught that off guard by the basement dwellers, if you will. But this movie could have very easily just been called the break-in.
Yes, something simple. And other films have more general titles than that, like Trespassing or Breaking and Entering. The People Under the Stairs is also kind of disappointing in my way because The People Under the Stairs, I think that's one of the few places where the makeup effects are really kind of poorly done. I wasn't
Yeah,
really
you know,
clear what they were going for.
maybe that's why we barely see them because the makeup effects weren't that good.
You kind of see like kind of caked on kind of white pasty makeup, maybe, but overall, I'm not clear what they were showing. Were they mutants? Are they mad? Are they just mentally ill? There's one character we haven't talked about who did a good job,
Oh,
named
right.
Roach. So Roach is kind of a younger uh person under the stairs who has escaped and he's running around through the walls, pissing off Daddy. He's played by Sean Wallen, a great character actor. If you look him up, you'll know exactly who he is. And he's had his tongue cut out, but he's, good-hearted. He helps Fool escape. Other than him, we don't really see most of the other people under the stairs, and we do see them as kind of often they're in shadows. They have flashlights for some strange reason I don't understand. And I felt like the makeup effects, it just didn't work. They look kind of poorly done. And this film has a decent budget. So that was just really disappointing. So let me ask you this question. If the actual people under the stairs were not even a part of the story, would that fundamentally change the story?
I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, I don't think it would. I think this film is just as bizarre if they get into the house and they find that there's this girl there who can't get out and then they're trapped in there with her. The people under the stairs don't really do anything to drive the plot forward at all, ever.
Yeah, you could just tell the story with the two homeowners just being Campbell nut jobs. Yeah, that's pretty much what they are. The people under the stairs are just there for added flavor, I guess.
Yeah, because one of the things that Alice does, she has this collection of dolls, I guess, that she knits that are all the people who have unfortunately entered the house and been killed. I feel like that tells enough of the backstory and the horror of the couple that you don't need these cannibalistic mutant monsters who live in the basement because the couple and their dog are the biggest antagonists in the film. I found that the whole time I kept saying, like, oh, well, the people in the series aren't actually really doing anything. I think you could take about the story would play out the same way.
Yeah, and honestly, from what happens in the movie, they really don't. They're really not that threatening. Pretty much, the only people they threaten are the homeowners. Roach was already the Kevin McAllister of this movie.
And this is where I think this might be the second time I'm suggesting this on the podcast. I would absolutely support a remake of this film being made. I think it's been a long time. I think there is enough material here to update and work with. I'd love to see this film remade.
Yeah, honestly, you know who I'd give this movie to? I would give it to the people that made The Descent.
Oh, that'd be good.
because they know how to do the undeveloped like cave dweller kind of look in that movie. And I'm pretty sure that's what they were trying to do in the people under the stairs, but it just didn't work.
Yeah,
So I
that's the
feel
thing.
like they could have very easily tackled that.
Yeah, that was the thing I kept thinking. Like, are they supposed to be like mutants who live in the dark? But when you saw them, they didn't look that way at all. So it seemed like they were underdeveloped, like even in terms of design wise, exactly what they were going to be. Again, it's a horrific concept that's already scary enough that these people, this couple, they're keeping a woman locked up in the house. She's never been outside. That's a horrific enough concept that I felt like they didn't need the people under sales. If you're going to do it well. And I felt like that's where the creature design, the makeup work just wasn't there for the actual people under the stairs. So let's kind of just wrap our discussion here. I love the fact that this is bizarrely entertaining. That's the best way I can frame it. I think tonally, it makes some really bad shifts. It's like having Jason and Yosemite Sam change places in the film sometimes. But the themes I like, it's funny. I will stay with my 2.5 out of 5 star rating for the film. This is a film that I think I would really appreciate seeing remade. I don't know how the rights issue works on that. You know, unfortunately, Wes Craven passed away several years ago, so maybe we'll never get that. But I would love to actually see a People Under the Stairs remake.
Yeah, that's valid. But here's the ultimate question of this episode: the people under the stairs. Would you recommend someone else to watch this?
I would. I think it's funny and bizarrely different enough that I would recommend this to people. I feel like we left that out. I think this is a guilty pleasure film. I can see some people really liking it. When you look
Yeah,
at Rotten Tomatoes, this is rated at like a 6.4 out of 10. That feels about right for me. Even considering the, cause of death that we've listed for this film, this is a guilty pleasure. I would say if you're bored, if you want to try something really different, give it a shot.
yeah. This is a nice, fun, bad movie. I'll give it that.
Yes, there is no way to not be entertained by what's happening in this film.
Yeah, if you're bored then while watching this, then maybe that says something about your taste.
Yeah. This has some of the biggest kind of WTFs I've ever seen in a film that I really enjoy. Was completely caught off guard. So this is something I would recommend, especially if you're into horror comedy. If you're into horror comedy, you probably have already seen this film, but we're the ones who never actually watched it before.
Well, here's the thing: if you watch a whole lot of Saturday Night Live skits, then you probably should watch this because that's pretty much what this movie is. It's a skit made to a huge motion picture.
Yeah, so thank you for the recommendation, our listener who recommended this for us. I'm glad that I've seen this. And
Yeah,
so,
and thanks for the recommendation too. Please recommend us more or don't. I don't know how I feel about this one. I'm still making my mind up about it.
and so that's it for this episode of Movie Postmortem. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give us 5 stars because even bad podcasts deserve a good review. Remember, whether it's good, bad, or just a guilty pleasure, every movie deserves a postmortem. Thanks for listening.
And as always, man, if you thought he was white before, you should look at him now. We'll see you next time.